Thanks for watching ERi-TV, dear viewers. Welcome to our news broadcast. Here are the headlines. Minister Osman Saleh addresses UN General Assembly. Efforts to empower youth in Southern region. Death toll in Bangladesh boat tragedy rises to 32, with dozens missing. North Korea, China resume freight train services. In our domestic news, Mr. Osman Saleh, Minister of Foreign Affairs, addressed the 77th United Nations General Assembly today, 26 September. In his address, Minister Osman Saleh said that the annual session of the UN General Assembly, held under the fitting theme, A Watershed Moment, Transformative Solutions to Interlocking Challenges, is taking place at an exceedingly preoccupying time of profound, intertwined and multiple crises of epic proportion, and these calamities have adversely impacted all corners of the global village. Minister Osman went on to say that in the past 2.5 years, the COVID-19 pandemic had exacted a huge human toll in global terms and has inculcated chronic economic difficulties and structural setback through domestic economic downturns and disruption of international supply chains, and that while this scourge persists, the world confronted these days with equally perilous fallouts of climate change and global warming, which are exacerbating the already precarious situation. Furthermore, Minister Osman said that the cyclical conflicts, which have assumed an exceptionally dangerous and almost apocalyptic dimensions with the war in Ukraine, have ratcheted up the impending crisis to unprecedented levels, and besides the COVID-19 pandemic, the other interlocking variables and dimensions of the crisis constitute the cumulative consequences and telltale symptoms of a tenuous and highly flawed global governance architecture, and are byproducts and manifestations of systematic failure of the unipolar world order that has prevailed for over 30 years. Minister Osman stressed the much-vaunted rules-based international order represents a skewed set of two-faced, asymmetric and non-consensual norms and regulations, and was essentially designed to advance and safeguard the privileges of its principal architects to the exclusion of the majority of other nations and peoples, and promote monolithic and patronizing ideological perspective, gives no room and space to historical context, distinct realities and cultures, and above all, to independent policy choices of other sovereign peoples and nations. The costly wars of intervention, especially in Africa and the Middle East in the past 30 years, heavy-handed meddling in domestic affairs, imposing of illicit and unilateral sanctions, distortion and weaponization of human rights. In brief, all the episodes of international and regional instability emanate from and are direct derivatives of the faulty global governance architecture, Minister Osman underlined. Minister Osman stressed that the negative ramifications of this dysfunctional system are not confined to the sovereign nations and peoples of the global south, but extreme and ludicrous inequalities where less than 1% of the population own 99% of national wealth, unbridled consumerism which has bred and continues to aggravate climate change, atomization of societies that have literally decimated social compassion and community care by fostering exclusive and unnatural individualism are dangerous trends that will ultimately undermine the social fabric and stability in individual countries and the global village at large. Minister Osman further said that Eritrea has indeed borne the brunt of this unfair international order through illicit sanctions, the use of surrogate forces to create a situation of permanent conflict and instability, as well as the weaponization of human rights to isolate and ostracize the young nation. Regarding Eritrea's view, Minister Osman underlined the need of the global village and the UN system to devise a new international order that is anchored on consensus with the full and equal participation of its constituencies, the sacrosanct principles of the equality of all member states, and the respect of the sovereignty and political independence of nations and peoples to be upheld. equitable representation of all member states in all decision-making international bodies to be guaranteed through viable and sustainable modalities and mechanisms and selective and partial parameters that impede collective well-being, and the fostering of a compassionate social system requires thorough review. The National Union of Eritrean Youth and Students branch in the southern region reported that efforts are underway to develop economic capacity of the youth with a view to enable them become self-supportive. Mr. Girmay Gabru, head of the union branch in the region, said that training programs on poultry and beef farming, weaving, wood and metalworks, catering, ceramic, electricity installation, beauty salon, dancing, maintenance of water pumps and others have been organized to the youth in the region, aimed at developing their vocational capacity and improve their livelihoods. Mr. Girmay went on to say that training programs focusing on computer technology, administration and leadership, graphics and editing have also been organized to youth in the civil service. Mr. Girmay also said that microcredit service has also been provided to a number of youth in the region with a view to encourage them initiate small-scale trade and farming activities, and that in the past 2 years over 1 million nakfa has been dispersed to 92 youth, including 52 girls. Mr. Girmay further called on the youth in the region to take advantage of the trainings organized by various partners. Mr. Zarasanai Tasfai, head of seeds development in Agordat subzone, called on farmers and especially those that are engaging in vegetables and fruits farming to follow instructions given by agricultural experts, which will guarantee good yield, indicating that strong efforts are being exerted in the supply of agricultural machinery and training to farmers. Mr. Zarasanai called on farmers to modernize their farming techniques, pointing out that the application of wrong pesticides in some areas is adversely impacting farming activities. Mr. Zarasanai called on farmers to firmly follow instructions provided by experts in the use of fertilizers and pesticides. Mr. Zarasanai also called on vegetables and fruits farmers to timely report in cases of prevalence of pests. Announcement from the Ministry of Health. One patient has been diagnosed positive for COVID-19 in tests carried out today at testing station in the central region. On the other hand, 5 patients who have been receiving medical treatment in hospital and the central region have recovered fully and have been discharged from the facility. The total number of recovered patients has accordingly increased to 10,063, while the number of deaths stands at 103. The total number of confirmed cases in the country to date has increased to 10,169. Ministry of Health, Asmara, 26 September 2022. That was our domestic news. Please stay tuned for the international right after the short break. At least 32 people have been killed and dozens feared missing after a boat packed with Hindu devotees sank in Bangladesh, officials said, in the worst waterways disaster to hit the country in more than a year. The small boat packed with mostly women and children on their way to a popular temple flipped over in the Karatoya River yesterday as onlookers screamed in horror from the shore near Boda town in the northeastern Panchagar district. District Police Chief Sirajul Huda said 7 bodies were found in the river. Police said the boat was carrying around 90 people, more than 50 being Hindu pilgrims on their way to the temple on the occasion of Mahalaya, when Hindus make offerings to their ancestors. The bodies recovered so far included 16 women and 10 children, said Jaharul Islam, District Administrator of Panchagar. He said the authorities were compiling the list of the missing based on information provided by the relatives. A 5-member committee is investigating the incident and they suspect overcrowding caused the accident. Sunday marked the start of the Durga Puja, the biggest Hindu festival in Bangladesh and other parts of South Asia. Thousands of Hindus in Muslim-majority Bangladesh visit the Bodheshwari temple on the occasion. The incident in the country's remote north was the latest in a string of similar tragedies blamed on poor maintenance and overcrowding in the low-lying Delta County with extensive inland waterways. North Korea and China have resumed freight train services after a 5-month suspension due to the pandemic. South Korean media has reported a freight train traveling from the Chinese border city of Dandong to North Korea's Seonaju. South Korea's Yonhap news agency reported today. Trains had been suspended since April 29 after an outbreak of COVID-19 in Dongdang. It was not immediately clear if the train that crossed the Sino-Korean Friendship Bridge today marked the resumption of regular services. But Yonhap news agency quoted an anonymous source in China as saying trains would run 1 or 2 times a day. China is North Korea's main economic lifeline, normally accounting for more than 90% of its trade, but cross-border commerce has been sharply curtailed during the pandemic. China's trade with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea plunged to $318 million in 2021, down 90% compared with pre-pandemic levels, according to Chinese customs data. Aid workers and analysts have warned that the country's isolation has hammered its already fragile economy and exacerbated food shortages that have resulted in widespread chronic malnutrition. Please stay tuned now for a recap of tonight's headlines. Mr. Osman Saleh addresses UN General Assembly. Efforts to empower youth in Southern region. Death toll in Bangladesh boat tragedy rises to 32 and dozens missing. North Korea, China resume freight train services. That was our news for tonight, dear viewers. It is good night from us.